up, you guys. Anybody who wants to come up, you can bang the gavel. All right, so come here, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. What's your name? So you say your thing and then hit it. Go ahead.
I move to call order of Chagrin Falls Learning Board of Education meeting of April 17th, 2024. Yeah.
All right. Okay, Lauren, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bendel.
Here.
Mrs. Hoy.
Here.
Mrs. Miller. Here. Dr. Sabo.
Here.
Dr. Schlepper.
Here.
Okay, Ashley Brudner, our treasurer, is not able to be with us tonight, so we need to appoint a treasurer pro tem, who's going to be Lauren Miller tonight, which is why she has to call her own name and then take the vote. I move to appoint, or it is recommended that the Board of Education appoint Lauren Miller to serve as a treasurer pro tempore for the April 17th, 2024 regular Board of Education meeting. I so move. Do I have a second? Okay, and Lauren, will you take the roll?
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller. Yes. Dr. Sabo.
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
Okay, would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and I move to approve the minutes from our 3/20/24 regular meeting. Do I have a second?
I second.
Mrs. Bendel. Yes, you have to ask me to
I
call the
don't
roll,
think- I
or
think you can
go
just go
ahead
ahead.
and do it.
You can
Okay.
go ahead.
Mrs. Hoy.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller. Yes. Dr. Sabo. Yes. Dr. Schlepper.
Yes.
And who was that? Who seconded that?
I got it.
Okay, and is this Lauren? Are you the?
This is me too.
This is
Yeah.
you. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Lauren Miller, who's going to introduce our student showcase. She's our Gurney rep.
All right, so we're fortunate to have here with us tonight several students and teachers from Gurney who are going to share with us the concept of the learner profile. As everyone sitting at these tables knows, because I have insisted all of them take self-assessments and personality tests, I think it's very important to be aware of your own strengths and motivations. I think it helps you work well as a team with other people, increases confidence, and helps you be mindful of what you need to do your best work. And I think that applies at all ages. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Jones to tell us more.
Thank you for letting us be here tonight to talk to you about our work and the work that our amazing Gurney students have done. The teachers that I have here with me tonight, in kindergarten we have co-teachers Miss Mazzola and Miss Kennedy. In first grade, Mr. Wise. In second grade, we have co-teachers Mrs. Landsberg and Mrs. Carrier. And in third grade, we have co-teachers Mrs. Andrews and Mrs. Blue. And if you remember from the fall when we presented on buddy classes, these are actually buddy classes, correct? Yeah, so we tried to tie it in there. But we are here to talk about some of the work we've been doing at Gurney with personalized learning. We've been learning the Ohio Personalized Learning Framework now for a couple years. We had it started with a small group of teachers last year, and this year we added a big group of teachers. So we have two cohorts now, about 15 different teachers working on this. And this year, as a whole staff, we really focused on being more learner-centered and specifically developing learner profiles and increasing student agency. And we chose this focus because we felt like it was really the base of personalized learning. If nothing else, it has to be personal. So it also tied into our strategic plan focus too, because the strategy under high quality learning really actually said increasing student agency with our instruction. So when we talk about agency, we mean student ownership, empowering students, letting them make decisions about their learning. But for students to have agency in their learning, they need two things. They need one, they need the opportunity to make decisions about their learning and to reflect on that. And two, they need to know themselves. They need to know their strengths, their interests, their weaknesses, things like that. Well, when you haven't been in school for very long or ever, it's kind of hard to know what you need, what your strengths are, what your challenges are. So we really felt Gurney had a really important job here. This needed to be the first time we had students talking about it. If learner profiles are going to be effective in the next building and the building after that, we have to start now. We have to start teaching students to know themselves as learners and then be able to self-advocate. So how do you do that with kindergartners, first graders, second and third graders? The teachers and the students here are going to tell you how we did it. We started as a staff by filling out our own learner profiles. You can kind of see in the background there, every staff member filled out their learner profile. We had them up in the building. A lot of teachers used them as examples for the students. So the students, I even had a student come to me once in the hallway and say, "I know things about you." And she was right, she knew things about me. So we started that way and set that example, and it has been just an incredible year seeing how these have unfolded. So I'm going to turn it over now. We're going to tell you how we rolled this out throughout the year, and then the students are going to tell you about themselves, what they've learned about themselves as learners this year. So I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Mazzola and Ms. Kennedy, kindergarten, and they will introduce you to their student.
Hi, I'm Miss Mazzola. Hi, I'm Miss Kennedy.
Hi, I'm Tatum.
So as Dr. Jones said, we worked on rolling this out to staff this year, and so before doing that, we reviewed learner profiles from a lot of other schools and districts, and we really had to decide what our goal was for our learner profiles and what we wanted our students to know about themselves so that they could advocate for themselves and make better decisions in the classroom. In kindergarten, that's a lot of talking about different choices we have in the classroom, a lot of environmental choices, and a lot of reflection. And we also want to use our profiles to help teachers know their students better so we can provide them with the best choices and give them their best learning opportunities.
So here up on the board is an example of a third grade profile. So we started here because this is like our end in mind when they leave Gurney. And then we scaled it down to kindergarten, and we scaled down the questions to what fits more appropriately for our age group.
All right, so Tatum is going to share what she's learned about herself this year. So what are some things to know about you as a learner?
I like to sit at my desk where it keeps me calm and focused on the screen. And I like to sit at a spot where I can see a board well.
And what is something you learned about yourself this year?
I've done lots of math and reading.
And when you start first grade, what do you want your teacher to know about you?
My name, and I've been a good girl in other classes and I follow directions.
Thank you.
This is the teacher guide for the learner profiles, and on our document, this was sent to every teacher in the entire building, and as you click through the different bullet points on there, you'll notice that each one of those takes you to a guide, and on that guide, there's different resources, so maybe there are lesson plans or novels that go with each section. For example, when I'm frustrated, I need, and you click on that number 4, and that'll take you to a lesson plan, a couple of different lesson plans, and it will also tell you things like, oh, here's a good novel when Sophie gets angry, really, really angry. And so you can read through that story. So before we present the idea to each of the classes, that we can look through and see what are some good ways to introduce each of those topics. There's also some different reflection ideas so that as we go through the year and our students change their opinions about different ways that they learn, that we can go back and these are ways that they can revise their work. So I'm going to let Owen speak to you about how he defines himself as a learner.
Some things to know about me as a learner are I love to read. I like to work in our classroom library. Sometimes I feel nervous. Something that changed about me as a learner this year is I'm a way better reader. When I start second grade, I am going to make sure the teacher knows I love to joke around.
Hi, I am Mrs. Carrier and this is Emily. And as we moved through the process, we noticed it was really important for both kids and students to set goals and be reflective of those as we go along. And one of the big goals is to be sure to include choice and voice in our classrooms. And choice is when students are encouraged to choose from maybe a set of options provided for them or the path that they take to learn the content and decide what works best for them. Voice is when students are responsible for designing the work that they do or activities or learning options. In order for students to learn about themselves, teachers have increased opportunities in the classroom for both choice, voice in their learning environment, like different seating options, or noise level tolerances, or partnerships, or working by themselves, what kind of materials or resources they use to accomplish a task, even the content or topics or activities. And then reflecting on these choices and the impact on their learning is so important to help them make future choices. And now Emily is going to tell you about herself as a learner.
Some things to know about me as a learner are I like to do math, I like to work alone a lot, I do my best learning when it is quiet. Something that changed about me as a learner this year is this year I got better at reading and spelling. When I start 5th grade, I am going to make sure the teacher knows I like to take my time. Hello, my name is Paige. Some things to know about me as a learner are I like to work with a partner who is on my level. When I don't feel rushed to do something, it is easier for me to work. I like it when it is quiet and everyone is working. Something that I learned about myself as a learner this year is I like writing more and it is easier for me. When I start 4th grade, I am going to make sure the teacher knows it's hard for me to talk in front of a large crowd when it's something new. I'm Irene. Some things to know about me as a learner are I like working with partners. I prefer not to work with an office because it makes me feel lightheaded or dizzy. I'm a very organized person. I like to keep all my things in order. Something that I learned about myself as a learner this year is sometimes I need a lot of help with things. I learned that it's okay to ask for help on some things. When I start 5th grade, I'm going to make sure the teacher knows sometimes I work too hard and don't give myself a break.
So it's one thing to know yourself as a learner, but it's a whole other thing to be able to communicate that to others and let them know about you. So before leaving Gurney, we want to be sure that our students have had ample practice telling teachers and staff about themselves as a learner. Creating their profiles each year will naturally give them opportunities to talk with their classroom teacher.
So for example, we were preparing for a test a couple weeks ago, and I was assigning specific students to get offices, which are those study carrels. And when I assigned Eileen an office, she approached me and said,
I feel anxious with an office.
so naturally I said, okay, you don't have to get an office, we'll find someone else and we'll put you in a spot that's nice and quiet though.
So in the late winter, we had all students start talking to each Encore teacher about their profile. And in May, our hope is that Dr. Jones, Mrs. Reed, our counselors, our psychologists, will each be able to go into the classrooms and also get to know the students and share about their learner profiles. Thank you.
So we're closing with this quote. First, we must know our students as learners, then we must help our students know themselves. And that really sums up our work this whole year, our focus. And I really like that it was the teachers that came up with the plan for the whole year, working on learner profiles. They created the guide for all the teachers. It was all teacher created. They created the schedule. We met once a month in grade level teams. We met 3 or 4 different staff meetings vertically so they can hear about learner profiles at each grade level from their colleagues. And they also felt it's really important. It's one thing to say now you have this information, you can self-advocate. But for a child, it feels funny inside it to go up to an adult that you don't know that well and say you need something or you want something to be different. So we thought, let's have them practice. So as Kelly said, they've been practicing. I think we just wrapped up practicing with the Encore teachers. So next month they'll get to practice with Mrs. Reed and myself and Mr. T and kind of feel what that's like to go up to somebody and talk about yourself as a learner. And the really good news is these learner profiles will continue through the other buildings. So Mr. Howell has a team at the intermediate school that's been working on their learner profiles to pick up where we left off. And Mrs. DeSenza at the middle school too. So with all of this practice, by the time they reach high school, they should be able to really make effective decisions about their learning and the courses that they choose and where they want to head and be better able to self-advocate. I know with college kid of my own, sometimes like, why won't you just go talk to the professor? So we're going to start in kindergarten, plus now I can tell them my kindergartners say things to their teachers, so it helps. So that's our work this year, and we are ready if you have any questions for anybody.
I have a couple questions. First, this is so exciting to see, and I saw the learner profiles over in like the Encore hallway earlier in the year, and it was really encouraging. How does the focus on the learner profile connect with the social emotional learning curriculum and approach of the district that you see here in Gurney?
That's a great question, and it's such a direct connection because especially here at Gurney, we focus on CARES. And the A in CARES stands for assertiveness. So this is the ultimate practice with that. And E stands for empathy, and that's, teachers are like, when a student came to Mrs. Blue and said that, she was empathetic and understood and made the adjustment. So we feel like it's just another example, but we're serving as role models for this. And it's hard to find opportunities for students to practice being assertive, right? So we use a lot in our STEM class, STEM challenges. You have to share your idea with your teammates, which is hard. And we were kind of struggling beyond that. How else do you fabricate reasons that a child would have to be assertive? So this is built right in now. Every year they're working on learner profiles, and it will hopefully become natural.
I have a follow-up question
Yeah.
to that as well. The part of the profile that we saw for these children that talked about something I've learned about myself, is that, does that include, I'm hoping, I'm probably asking a question that's leading, but I'm hoping that that includes the idea of normalizing overcoming challenges, right? And, resilience got a little bit became kind of a bit of a cliche in the last 5 to 10 years in education. And so I'm curious about if there are scripts that the students are given, or just, modeling that they're able to use, the right kinds of, or language that would help them express challenges and then also celebrate when they overcome that.
So what I learned about myself as a learner this year is not actually in the profile. We were having them pick a few things to share with you tonight.
Okay.
So this is actually the learner profile, the third grade, right? So it's, I do my best learning at school when, things that are hard for me to do at school, things that are easy for me to do at school. When I'm frustrated, I need things I want the teacher or others to know about me. These are my interests, and then we haven't answered it yet, but next month all the kids will be filling in this year I am most proud of. So that's your celebration at the end of every year. And this is really, a lot of this tied in with responsive classroom. So we use Stephanie Malley, who's our responsive classroom certified teacher, with our personalized learning group. We developed this so that Stephanie would make sure we were weaving in some responsive classroom strategies, and this is a big one, end of year celebrations. But for students to be able to look back when they're in whatever grade and say, oh, at the end of third grade, this is what I was proud of. At the end of second grade, this is what I was proud of, will be really special. I think the teachers that talking about what I've learned about myself, that's the reflection part, which I don't want to speak for the teachers, but just the conversations I've been in this year, that's probably the most challenging thing with these as a teacher, is building in that time to have your students reflect. But if you don't, then the whole thing is pointless. So, and we all know that. So we're really building it in this year. But we're also revising these. So at least once a trimester, they're revising in second and third grade. And first grade, because it took a little bit longer to complete it, has revised at least once. And kindergarten's trying to get through it one time, right? But even as kindergarten goes through and answers the next one, I know that teachers are saying, kids are saying, oh, but that's not my interest anymore. So they're still revising too. So they are talking about how as you move through the year, what do you know about yourself that's changed? But it's more of a conversation.
And that's fantastic. Thank you for adding that clarity.
But I did want to say too, like how this rolls into our increase in offering choice and voice in the classroom. I've been trying to highlight that in our newsletters every month and put examples in, the principally speaking, if anybody reads it, that part, examples from classrooms of choice that teachers are offering in the classroom, or student voice and things like that. It's been really fun.
Thank you so much for coming. We would love to have you stay if you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, but we understand that you may need to go home and get some sleep or do homework or just have fun. So we're going to just take a minute if anybody wants to excuse themselves, and then we'll continue with our meeting. We have no one signed up for public participation tonight, so I'm going to move to our consent agenda items. I move to approve consent agenda items 4.02 to 4.13. Do I have a second?
And then we discuss.
Yeah. If there's any comments, otherwise I'll just take the roll. Yeah, Lauren, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller, yes. Dr. Sabo? Yes. Dr. Schlepper?
Yes.
Okay, next is superintendent's recommendations. I move to approve superintendent recommendations 5.02 to 5.16. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Jennifer, do you want to walk us through these?
Sure. If we start with 5.02, the proposed K-12 curricula change, Mr. Mulliman is here because he and Jen Dinko led the work of this with Senate Bill 288 along with Becky Quinn, our Director of Curriculum. The interesting part that we'll share is this is a mandate, so it's a requirement of pieces, but if Jared, if you would like to share any of the pieces that you did for how we selected those.
But can you please use the microphone to share? Otherwise, it's useless to the 36 people that may be watching.
Yeah, so it's never an easy topic to talk about, with sexual abuse prevention, but necessary. And with Senate Bill 288 coming out last summer, we wanted to take some time to look through and vet the programs and take the time to look through everything. And it's a little different K-6 versus 7-12, with K-6 being programming decisions that it really says that anyone who goes through the training could present, so that includes classroom teachers. We really thought it was important for our counselors to be looking at this work and looking at the programs. So we started that in the fall, looking through all the approved programs with the counselors and the care team, including our wellness coaches, and really narrowed it down. We called a lot of the vendors, got materials from, talked to some other schools. We narrowed it down to 2 programs with the Educate to Protect and the Speak Up. I actually went through the Speak Up curriculum because we were looking at doing that pre-K or K-12. They had programs approved for high school, middle school, and with the elementaries. I watched it with actually one of our employees who has a elementary age student, and it just, the language, it wasn't the content as much as how it was being delivered. And how we're imagining kindergartners hearing this and watching the video and hearing it from just a person on a video on the screen. We really felt like the Educate to Protect was better packaged. It has pausing points for Japet, actually, our counselor, to stop and to deliver the content along with Ms. Fosna and interject. They're hearing it from a friendly face, someone who they know, and they can ask questions at that point. So. It really does broach the topic in a effective way, gets the point across, and really does educate. And it's all about having trusted adults who you can go to if you're feeling a certain type of way, and that no matter what it is, you can come to a trusted adult and ask them to identify who those trusted adults might be. So we just really felt most comfortable with Educate to Protect. Ms. Quinn reviewed the Speak Up curriculum with Ms. Dennison, our middle school health teacher. It is a little different because it's integrated into the health content in the curriculum. So they felt most comfortable with that. It was applicable to 7-12. The difference in that is that it needs to only be covered 1 hour each of middle school, and then 1 hour in 9 through 12. And because it's integrated in the health curriculum, the timing of it felt a little rushed to have this legislation come through in July. Teachers come back in August, and then they have first quarter or first semester health students in their class. So we wanted to take some time to go through it, and that's why we're now proposing it to be integrated into the curriculum. We will catch up with the kids who might have had health this year and put them through with either our counselors or support staff or health, and haven't talked through the process yet, but we will get them caught up, and they will be able to meet the requirement of 1 hour over the middle school years and 1 hour in the high school. So
So, just like the science of reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a list of curriculum.
Correct.
So there's a bill that says that we need to do this, and then there's a list of required curriculum that we get to choose from,
Yes,
but we can't create our own.
we can't.
Okay,
Yeah, so this was, yeah, I mean, it went from everywhere from, reaching out to one, I won't name them, they're like, yeah, we're good at checking the boxes. Nope, we're moving on, right? So like, we're not gonna, and just looking at some other applicable schools, Educate to Protect, Westlake High School, City Schools has used Educate to Protect for years. They're actually featured in their promotional video, so their counselors speak highly of it and resonates well with the parents and students at Westlake.
and I haven't read the bill. Is there a notice provision for parents, or?
There is.
And how
yes.
does that work?
So pending board approval, once it's approved, we'll send a communication out notifying parents about the requirement. There's a link in the letter. It's ready to go. Link in the letter to the information on the Department of Education workforce about Senate Bill 288. All the programs are listed there. And we actually are including the information. One of the things we liked about Educate to Protect as well, they packaged it very nicely in a concise way of understanding what their child would be going through with the curriculum. If they choose to, they can opt out. So there's an opt-out Google form that's linked right in the letter and the email that will go out to them. And so they'll have a few weeks to just opt their child out. And then we've already made arrangements with Gurney and CFIS to find a place for them when they're going through, their classmates are going through the program.
And is there funding that comes from the state on this to help support this, or is this just we're required to do it with no funding?
We're required to do it with no funding. There are options for free programs. Educate to Protect, there was a cost associated with it. It wasn't much, and because we bought it this year, we had a discounted rate for the next 5 years, I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And this is just a general question about curriculum, but do you see this as a trend? I mean, I know that with the science of reading, it's, pick from this list, and now with this, it's pick from this list. Do you think that's the way it's heading more and more, or do you think this is unusual? Or has it been that way before and it's just sort of a pendulum? I like to put everybody on the spot, Jim. It's my thing.
Do I see it as a trend? I do see it as a trend. I'll answer it that way. I do see it as a trend. I won't say whether that's good or bad, but I do see it as a trend as programs that are, in legislation and the Department of Education workforce are approving for us to pick from. So.
Well, and I think, good, or it depends on the program, right? Probably sometimes it's great, sometimes we wish it was something different.
Right, yeah.
But from a funding point of view, it makes a difference at the board level, because if we're told to pick from these programs, but there's no funding attached, that's something we have to, factor in.
Yeah, I mean, the House Bill 123 is the other one that was last 2 years ago, and it was the same thing. It had the approved list of programs to choose from. There was an option there to submit your own programming. We were in the midst of coming out of strategic planning to look at programming anyway. We had some people familiar with 2 of the programs that we were looking at on the list, so we decided to dive into the ones that were already approved, and I think that's what we're moving forward with on House Bill 123. So yeah, I mean, it is a trend.
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah, I've heard math too. Okay,
Coming soon.
thanks so much. Anybody else have any questions?
Sharon, I was just gonna say, I know this is hard to talk about as
Yeah.
someone who's in this field and as a juvenile victim specialist in the field. I just want to say how much I appreciate you doing the due diligence to look at something that was age and developmentally appropriate and evidence-based to really help support our kids. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
And I don't know how important this is, but when the organization drew up this MOU, they spelled Chagrin Falls wrong at every possible opportunity.
Educate to Protect it, or?
Yeah. Whatever the foundation
speak up,
was
but
that
there's
drew
2
up
different
the
programs,
MOU.
okay.
Yeah, so we might want to fix it before we sign it, just in
Oh.
case we don't get credit because we're not charging Falls.
The attached MOUs on Speak Up, so I'll make sure that, yeah.
Great, wonderful. Thanks.
And 504 are non-renewals of as-needed contracts. These are common that you'll see this time of year, and when we enter into these agreements every school year, people are aware that these are 1-year as-needed contracts and that they will non-renew. So that's something that you'll see typically at the April meeting. As well as we look at 505, 506. These are your recommendations for your teacher contracts, your classified contracts. And 507, just look at a little more carefully. This would be your continuing contracts for teachers. So there's a more rigorous evaluation process that they go through in order to be recommended for continuing contract. So we have, I think, 5 teachers this year that have been recommended. 508, you'll start seeing more and more of this in the next few board meetings, because this will be the time that teachers will need in the summer months to be prepared for the upcoming school year. So you really don't even get to close out before you're preparing and approving summer work. In 509, and those should look pretty common, those are just different contracts. You have a long-term sub, you have supplementals, additional hours. A reclassification, just to make sure everyone understands, we have different classifications for aides in our OPSI contract. And so sometimes the needs of the building change. And so the way that the employee serves the building and serves the student changes, which puts them in a different classification according to the contract. And they're paid differently according to that classification. So that's what you're seeing in 5.12. We have some resignations, which will be unfortunately common this time of year. Additional hours. Remember, Debs works for our community ed programs, being an enrichment coordinator. She does a fabulous job, and because she does such a fabulous job, she needs some more hours, and so we know that. And then 516 is policy, and it's kind of unique to only have one. We're finishing out getting everything posted and done, but we will see more policies coming up in May and June. We want to go back and relook at 0131 because often we get short timelines to change policy, and we might need to be able to take a faster action on a policy. And the way it was written before, we had to have 2 readings and some other pieces. The modification to 0131 allows us to ensure that we're in compliance with different timelines for policies. So that's why we're revising that one. And I think 517 just names providers. And Chris is here if you have any questions about the paving project. Okay. See, they just wanted you to come and welcome you this evening.
I just hope there's not more paving after watching that water run down East Washington in front of the high school. It looked like it was really tearing some things up, so. Yeah. Great, thank you.
The last one I think is self-explanatory.
Okay. Lauren, please take the roll.
Actually, it's so much better at this. Okay, Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy. Yes. Mrs. Miller. Yes. Dr. Sabo.
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper.
I move to approve treasurer's recommendations 6.02 and 6.03. Do I have a second?
Wait, is this treasure
Yes.
for the 6?
6.
Oh.
Yeah, 6.0, 6.02, 6.03. Do I have a second? Yes, Robert, second. If anybody has any questions on those, Jennifer's going to try to answer those for Ashley. If there's anything that anyone has a question about that would be addressed to her, you can feel free to email her or.
You've seen equipment disposal before, and 603 is that because contracts start August 1, we have interim contracts when employees start prior to a full-year contract.
Great.
So those should be pretty easy.
Great. Anybody have any questions beyond that?
Just a small comment that I like in the equipment disposal, it's not just cannot, it's a treadmill. It's not that it is not working, it's like cannot be fixed anymore. Right, so I just want to point out that it gives me confidence to appreciate that people are trying to not waste our taxpayer dollars by doing their best, until the last resort.
Okay, Lauren, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller? Yes. Dr. Sabo? Yes. Dr. Schlepper?
Do we have any other business? We do not have anybody signed up for public participation, so we will be skipping that. I move to, or no, wait, actually, Lauren.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I make a motion to enter into executive session in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22 for the sole purpose of the consideration of the following matters: to consider one or more as applicable of the checkmarked items with respect to a public employee or official: employment, dismissal, compensation of a public employee or official, and matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes. Okay, so I made the motion. We have a second?
We need a second.
I'll second.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller? Yes. Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Dr. Schlepper?
Okay, our next meeting is May 15th at 7 o'clock in the high school.
That'll be our senior showcase, and that'll be in the library. And just make a note, we're to 2 meetings a month in May and June because we're in hiring season, and so we'll have lots of business to do. Hopefully not a lot, but typically those agendas are pretty full. So just make sure that you mark that May will have 2 meetings as well.
And that's always a fun meeting when we get to see what our seniors have been up to, so. you can
And I
tune
will
in.
also be celebrating my own birthday by bringing cupcakes or some other, treat for people that show up and stay longer than just the student showcase.
Okay, we will not be taking any action after executive session.